I'm Hallie Hart, a sports reporter at the Stillwater News Press, and with Oklahoma State's opening series coming up against Vanderbilt, I wanted to reach out to a Vanderbilt beat writer and get a perspective on that series from her. So we have Aria Gerson here today, and Aria, would you like to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Aria Gerson. I cover Vanderbilt for the Tennessean in Nashville, and I covered their College World Series run last year, so I'm excited to get into a new season with Vanderbilt baseball.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. So
yeah, it's great to be here.
Thank you so much. I wanted to start by just saying one of the topics going into this season for Oklahoma State has been kind of how they're managing these high expectations for the season. And they're, ranked number 7 in preseason polls. There's a lot of hype around this team. And Coach Josh Holliday talked about how starting things off with Vanderbilt is really a way to just jump right into it. You're not having a tune-up game to start with. This is the high-level elite competition you're going to face from the beginning. So from your perspective, with Vanderbilt being ranked 3, 2 in some polls, how are they managing those expectations and looking to kind of build on the World Series success they've had?
Right. Well, obviously, this is a familiar situation for Vanderbilt to be in. They've been ranked pretty high, the last couple seasons, but obviously, I think they're telling themselves, like, after the way that everything happened last year, where, first of all, their opponent in the semifinals of the College World Series had to pull out due to COVID, and then they advanced to the finals, and they lost in the finals to Mississippi State. So I think they're kind of disappointed about how that ended, and trying to maintain some of that motivation. And, I think Tim Corbin is really good at managing those expectations. But, Josh Holliday he used to work for Tim Corbin back when they made their first College World Series in 2011. And so, Tim Corbin talked about yesterday how, it's good to play other Omaha contending teams that, that they're going to bring their A game, and that this is going to be a team that, like, you might be facing in the postseason. So I think Vanderbilt's trying to give themselves that challenge.
Right. And I like how you mentioned the connection before with Josh Holliday on that staff, because that's one thing I think is cool is then since Coach Holliday's been at OSU, they have continued to keep up that connection and kind of the little bit of rivalry against each other. So one thing that I wanted to jump into as well is just looking at the lineups for this team. I know you had mentioned something on Twitter about the power hitters that Vanderbilt has on their team versus kind of the returners with Oklahoma State. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Vanderbilt has a really experienced lineup. Almost all of their position players came back this year. And one of the big things that I think this lineup is just really good at is in their power potential. So obviously, Dominic Keegan, was their best hitter last year probably, and he is coming back for his senior season. And he hit 15 home runs and 17 doubles last year. Carter Young, shortstop, he hit 16 home runs and 15 doubles last year. Wow. And there's also several other players who had a fair number of home runs that are coming back. Third baseman Parker Noland had 7 home runs. Tate Colwick, who plays all over, he had 6 home runs, and that was while he was struggling with hand injuries. Spencer Jones only had 3 home runs last year, but he is actually rehabbing from Tommy John surgery. So he's finally healthy, and he is 6'7", really big guy. So, you can just imagine the kind of power that he could have. And then at the top of the lineup, you have Enrique Bradfield, last year's SEC Freshman of the Year, who stole 47 bases last year, and he had an on-base percentage of .451, so he is getting on base and stealing bases ahead of all of these big power threats in the lineup. And so I think with this Vanderbilt team, you're going to see a lot of strikeouts. They do, strike out a lot, but when they're not striking out, you have over the fence threats, you have doubles threats, and then you have the speedsters that getting on base ahead of them.
So it sounds like they have a lot of depth in their rotation, in their lineup. And I think that that's one thing with Oklahoma State that, as you mentioned, they when you talk about that kind of like there's a lot of strikeouts, but there also is home run potential. I think of a guy like Colin Simpson, who used to play for Oklahoma State. That was very much how he approached the game. But you have people like him, Carson McCusker, and last season Christian Encarnacion Strand emerged on the scene. Those guys are gone now. So that's one thing I think looking at Oklahoma State is now that Christian Encarnacion Strand, who really kind of led that home run hitting last season, now that he is gone, he was selected in the MLB draft, it's kind of a matter of who will step up and fill those spots for Oklahoma State. And I think there are some answers there. Noland McLean is a guy who actually had an interesting story coming in playing baseball and football, and then last season emerged a little bit as a power hitter and ended up dealing with a back injury kind of in that main stretch of the Big 12 schedule. But he's someone who has potential to do that. Jake Thompson is someone who does as well. So they do have those guys, but I think it will be interesting to see kind of how they fill in those gaps from last year.
Yeah, I know that somebody on Oklahoma State's roster that I'm familiar with actually is Griffin Dershing, the grad transfer from Northern Kentucky. He won the college home run derby in 2019. So I was actually watching that. I was covering the Cape Cod Baseball League that summer, so I was following some of the college baseball, and I know that he's a big home run threat for Oklahoma State, but I definitely think that Vanderbilt, like their roster is constructed with a lot of returning power hitters, and so I think for them it'll be all about the home run.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see how that shows itself starting with this opening series. Another topic, now we've talked about the hitting, I want to look at the pitching. What can we expect from Vanderbilt's pitching rotation this weekend?
Yeah, so Tim Corbin set up a really interesting pitching rotation this weekend. So on Friday, he'll be starting Chris McIlvain. He's a junior, and he was their setup man last year. He made one start, and then he went out and started in the Cape Cod League. He started the championship game in the Cape Cod League, actually, and he's, getting a shot at the rotation this year. Saturday, Nick Maldonado is another one. He was one of the closers. They had two closers last year. He was one of the two closers. He was actually like preseason All-American as a relief pitcher, but they're giving him the chance to start this year. He was draft eligible last year. He did not get drafted. He decided to come back to school, and they're giving him a shot to start. He throws a ton of strikes. He had just 7 walks last year in 50.2 innings, which is a really good rate of strike throwing. So I'm interested to see what he can do in the rotation. And then on Sunday, they're actually going with a freshman, Carter Holton. Carter Holton is a lefty, and he has a ton of potential. I saw him pitch in the fall in some scrimmages and some exhibition games. And I thought that he looked as good as their more experienced pitchers. But obviously for any freshman starting in the SEC the very first weekend against a top 10 team, that is different from pitching in a scrimmage. So, it'll be a big game for him, but I think that shows Tim Corbin really thinks that Carter Holton is an important part of Vanderbilt's future and wants to see how he does in that environment.
Yeah, when you're willing to take a chance on a freshman like that, I think that definitely shows you've got a lot of faith in what their ceiling can be. And looking at Oklahoma State's rotation for this weekend, their probable starting pitchers are listed. For Friday, you have Justin Campbell, and he's someone that there's a lot of high expectations for this season. He's already been named to the Golden Spikes Award watch list. He's someone who had success on this team during the past season, so he seems to really be kind of that ace that they're building their pitching plan around, but they've got a little bit of a kind of 1-2 punch, as people have said, now that Victor Medeiros has transferred into Oklahoma State, and he is expected to be the Saturday starter. He transferred from Miami, and so he's in the rotation, and then you have as the starter for Sunday, Bryce Osmond. So they've got some guys with some experience, even though Victor Medeiros had his at Oklahoma State. But then they also talked about the importance of the bullpen depth this season. And so they're kind of, got some guys who've come back from injuries, gotten a little stronger. And so that'll be interesting to see too. I think all in all, we've got just a really fascinating, competitive matchup to start with this opening weekend. Is there anything else I haven't mentioned that you'd like to kind of address?
Yeah, well, I think the other interesting part with Vanderbilt's pitching is they actually have last year Vanderbilt, they had Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter. Those are both gone. And for their Sunday starter, they kind of rotated through a bunch of different options. And the main three players that they had start on Sunday last year were Patrick Riley, Christian Little, and Thomas Schultz. Now, all three of those players are still on the team, but none of them were selected for the starting spots this weekend. So those three players, they are not injured. They are still available. And so possibly they could come out of the bullpen and they can all go multiple innings. And so I don't know what the plan is. I don't know if they're planning to maybe piggyback because Vanderbilt has a bunch of games early in the season, a bunch of midweek games, or if they're planning to, have competition for the starting spots in some way. But those three pitchers are experienced starters. They've had ups and downs, but they have started before and they could be potentially available. Now the bullpen, there are some returning relievers in the bullpen, but it's kind of unsettled as to what the roles will be because most of their best relievers last year are now competing for starting spots, that being McIlvain and Maldonado. So it's a bit unclear, who the closer is going to be, who will be, that ninth inning guy, but perhaps somebody will emerge and be a shutdown guy in that role this weekend. We just don't know, who it might be. And so I think that's something Vanderbilt, wants to figure out is like, who is their ninth inning guy.
Wow. Well, when you have a team where there's people who were starters and none of them are even listed, that's something that's got to open the eyes of Josh Holliday and the Cowboys as they're looking at that pitching rotation they're going to face, knowing, like you said, there's guys who could come out of the bullpen and very much have potential to be starters. And so that's something I think the Cowboys have worked on too, is kind of being able to, when we had media day with Josh Holliday, I know he talked about kind of being able to not just have those strong starts, but then who can come in, really continue that. And something that I think maybe they struggled with a little bit during the past season, but something that they seem to have a little more confidence in. I know Roman Fansalker is somebody who dealt with Tommy John surgery, was out in 2019, and Coach Holliday said that he thinks, he's the healthiest that he's ever been. Trevor Martin was a freshman last season, really burst onto the scene as a Big 12 all-freshman candidate selection. And so they've got that potential, but there is no question Vanderbilt is a tough opponent to face for that first opening weekend. So thank you so much for joining me to preview the series. And if our followers would like to follow your coverage of Vanderbilt baseball against Oklahoma State, where can they reach you on social media?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Aria, ARIA _Gerson, GERSON.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.